Okay, guys, so I promise I won't make a habit out of this kind of format for my Dead by Daylight videos, but I really don't want to spend too much time on this one. Look, here's the thing. First of all, I want to apologize if my audio sounds a little bit weird. My microphone's been acting spotty, but it's okay. We'll work through it. But back to the point. The twins are a killer in Dead by Daylight that I simply don't enjoy from a gameplay perspective and from a lore perspective. Their design, first of all, is disgusting, and their lore is just wrong. Not that it's bad per se, although it has problems, but that it's the kind of stuff that makes my stomach turn. And maybe for others it's not that big a deal. Maybe others kind of think that, wow, Raven, you've got a really weak stomach then. Well, it's gross, and you'll see why. Charlotte and Victor Deschet were born in the 17th century in France in a very unlikely manner. Conjoined twins. Now, let me explain this about the conjoined twin thing. I'm not against the idea of a conjoined twin. That's kind of a unique perspective for a killer or a survivor. I could see that going both ways. But the way they handle this is what bothers me. So Victor, the brother, was literally growing out of his sister's stomach, with his lower limbs intertwined around his sister's muscles and organs, making them impossible to separate from one another. That's almost unheard of. I mean, it's miraculous they survived after birth, but even though they did, there was nothing but hardship waiting for them. Their mother was branded a witch, as people claim that Charlotte and Victor were a demon spawn, and unable and unwilling to prove them wrong, Charlotte and Victor were raised to run, hide, and steal to survive. Well, I say Victor and Charlotte, but Victor mostly just hung out of his sister's stomach. He really didn't do anything else. They adapted well to this life until it caught up with them. Their mother was caught and tried as a witch and burned alive at the stake for Charlotte and Victor to both watch. Afterwards, the twins were caged and sold to a secretive group of people in black robes who took them away to a secret temple where strange and horrible experiments were performed on them. Victor lashed out at any who came near them like a wild animal, and Charlotte forced all of her energy on protecting him. Until at last, the twins finally managed to escape through a fire, but in the escape attempt, Victor died. Victor's body, which had never aged past infancy, stayed attached to Charlotte, hanging and gradually rotting as Charlotte just couldn't part with it. Not just emotionally, but literally. I mean, she obviously couldn't bear to remove herself from the only family she ever had left, but honestly, given the time period, there was no safe way to properly remove Victor's body from her. She lived off of pig slop and any other disgusting food she could steal or scrounge for. She would steal and burgle to get by, and on occasion would have to kill in order to do so. But all of this couldn't protect her and her dead brother from malnourishment and the eventuality of death and winter. That winter, she finally prepared herself for death when suddenly a black fog engulfed them and Victor came back to life. And what's more, he jumped out of Charlotte's stomach and began running. Yeah, a baby that had never ever walked in its entire existence suddenly figures out how to do it. Entity magic. Charlotte gives chase. When she found her brother barely looking human, like something deformed and feral, the fog reached out to claim him, and Charlotte went in after it, determined to kill any who would threaten her brother. Now, the lore is, in a simple word, disgusting. For one thing, I feel sick to my stomach reading stuff like this. The suffering of children and the body horror of this idea is mind-blowing. Not necessarily a conjoined twin situation, but the dead infant brother still attached to his sister for years, rotting all of it. I mean, dear Lord, that's macabre. Which, of course, was the point, I'm sure. But what's more than that, there are things here that just don't make sense. Let's look past my own personal misgivings and look at what doesn't make sense. For example, why weren't the twins killed right out of the womb? Yes, the mother obviously loved them and wants to protect them, of course, but it says that the midwife was horrified by them and called them a demon and then ran out of the room. She clearly would have gone to get the magistrate or a judge or a priest or some kind of authority of some variety, and the minute they see it, wouldn't they kill it too? I mean, the mother would be too weak from childbirth to do anything about it. So why didn't the babies just die then? Then, of course, why didn't the angry mob that burned their mother for witchcraft not also burn the twins? Why sell them to some dark organization that they don't know? Are they so superstitious about witchcraft that they kill a woman because of her deformed offspring, but still rational enough to know that they can sell that demon spawn off to a mysterious organization with agendas of their own? Would the judge or priest or whoever's in charge of this not ask, we killed the mother of this demon, but I suppose we could sell this demon to this mysterious organization. Are you serious? That just seems dumb to me and incredibly convenient. That seems incredibly convenient for the fact that, oh wow, look, we killed the mother of this demon spawn, but we're not going to kill the demon itself. We're going to give it over to these other people that we don't know. Where does that line up in logic at all? And then there's the question of how Victor died. I read the lore over and over, and it doesn't give a clear reason why he died. It says Charlotte escaped through a fire, but it doesn't say Victor was badly burned or suffocated. So how did her brother die? I guess you could assume that it was suffocation. But if it was the fire, then how come Charlotte didn't die either? I mean, they're both sharing the same body, technically. And then, of course, there's the entity getting involved in the first place. This is a question. How does the entity choose its killers and survivors? I suppose it's different for each one, but why would you choose Charlotte as a killer? She isn't a skilled killer. She's not a psychopath or sociopath or serial killer or monster. It's stated in the lore that Charlotte only killed when necessary. She's not a seasoned butcher, and she doesn't take pleasure in it, so why take interest in her as a killer? If anything, if you want my opinion, what the entity could have done is brought Victor back to life and age him up into a large zombie-like abomination, and then have Charlotte be a survivor who went into the fog to find and save her brother, only to discover that her brother wants her dead as much as anyone else. Because the brother, being brought back to life, could blame all of humanity for what happened to him and his sister, and blame his sister for not taking care of him better, for not protecting him, for letting him die. So maybe he holds resentment to his sister and to all of humanity. Meanwhile, Charlotte, who's just happy that her brother's alive, wants to try to redeem him and find hope and find comfort in the fact that he's still alive and maybe fix their lives now that they're separate, but she can't do that because Victor's too far gone. But I think that would have been a cool idea, but we get what we get. Anyway, I guess what I'm getting at here is that the lore is just half-baked, but it makes up for it by being unbelievably dark and macabre, which for some people is all you need. I have noticed that in a lot of cases, there are people who are willing to excuse bad writing or inconsistencies as long as the story delivers on an emotional impact that they like. For example, this story made me feel something, therefore I'm going to ignore the writing inconsistencies. That is the heart getting in the way of the mind. And in some cases, I can understand it. There are certainly some moments, like in shows and games that I play and watch, that they'll have huge emotional impactful moments for me to the point that I can excuse the inconsistencies or the bad story writing. So I can understand why some people overlook that here. But for me, who's not a big fan of that kind of dark and macabre kind of stuff, I notice the inconsistencies a bit more. But that's not what y'all care about. Let's talk about the power. The twins' power is Blood Bond. The power is pretty simple to understand. You control Charlotte for the majority of the trial. You can press the power button at any point to immediately release Victor from your body and switch to controlling him. While playing as Victor, you can move faster than Charlotte can. You're much smaller, and you have your own capabilities. While controlling Victor, Charlotte cannot move, and you cannot see what she does. As Victor, you don't attack the same way, though. You charge up a pounce attack, which, if you hit a survivor with it, you will either injure or down them. If you injure them in this way, Victor will latch onto the said survivor and hold on tight. The survivor cannot interact with the environment while Victor is holding on to them, and they have to struggle to remove him. While Victor is latched on, you switch back to Charlotte and can close in on the struggling survivor. However, if Victor's thrown off, he can be stomped on and crushed. Further, if Victor misses his pounce, he is stunned temporarily and can be crushed in this state as well. If Victor's crushed in any way, he will return to Charlotte after a set period of time. Alternatively, if Victor is left alone and you switch back to Charlotte's POV, Victor will act as a radar, screeching whenever survivors get within a certain distance of him and giving you killer's instinct to see where those survivors are. However, while left alone, Victor is vulnerable and to being crushed if left there. He will not defend himself or run away. The key to these killers is coordination and mastering Victor's pounce well, okay, I'll just say it. The real key to twins is slugging. Now, many of you who play Dead by Daylight know what slugging is, but for those who don't, slugging is a tactic where you knock down the majority or all of your survivors before hooking them. Basically, you hit a survivor, and then before you pick it up to hook them, you go after another survivor. Now, many survivor mains hate this tactic, and I confess it can be annoying. But for the twins, it's probably their most common tactic. Why? Simple. If Victor downs a survivor, in order to pick them up, you have to switch back to Charlotte and walk over to that downed survivor to do so. And that may take time, depending on how far away Victor was when you switched to him. In that time, if a survivor runs to that downed comrade in order to help them, they run within the range of Victor's radar, and that will give you Killer's Instinct to inform you of their presence, allowing you another free hit on any survivor attempting to get close. Honestly, the twins can be a strong killer in the right hands, but it does require some work and effort to figure out how to properly use them. So I'm not going to say she's a bad killer. I'm going to say she's one that requires a lot of skill to use. And yes, someone's going to say skill issue, but I get lucky with her sometimes. As for her perks, the twins use coup de grace, hoarder, and oppression. Now, 2 of these perks are pretty strong, while 1 is okay. Coup de grace is a pretty strong perk depending on the killer and a great way to catch survivors off guard. Each time a generator is completed, this perk gains 2 tokens. When you perform a lunge attack in the chase, you spend 1 token to increase the distance of your lunge by 80%. This is a great way to catch an opponent who's a little ahead of you but thinks that you're a safe distance. I like coup de grace, and I know a lot of people do too. Hoarder is highly situational and is only really useful under the right circumstances. This perk spawns 2 extra chests in the trial automatically. Anytime a survivor interacts with a chest or picks up a new item, there's a loud noise notification for 4 seconds, indicating the location of that survivor. Useful to finding survivors early on if they're seeking to pick up an item, and it does pair well with Franklin's demise, but honestly, it's a skippable one. And then oppression. This is probably my favorite perk of hers. When you damage a generator, 3 other generators immediately start regressing as well. If a survivor is working on a generator at the time, they will receive a difficult skill check instead. Now, I love this perk as it's a great way to counter certain gen rushing tactics and to have continuous control over the gens around the map. And that about does it for this video. Finally done with the twins. I am glad we finally got that out of the way because she's easily one of my most hated killers to play as. Not as much as the Singularity because I just hate his guts, but still, we got through it. Next is the all-kill chapter, and we'll be doing the survivor Yoonjin Lee, one of my personal favorite survivors, if I'm being honest, not just because of her design and her lore, but also because, honestly, her perks fit me to a T. But that's all we have to say right now. We'll be dealing with Yoonjin Lee and her killer, the Trickster, a little bit later in the fog. Take care.